Alright, first video. This is exciting, but I'm not sure what to say. Maybe I should go with an intro that most young audiences would appreciate, and then I'll be appreciated.
What's up, YouTube? It's your boy, Kinosaur.
My body has seemed to reject it. Maybe I should try something simpler. Hello everyone, this is Kinosaur, not Kinosaur. I am sure that many of you will think that right off the bat, as it sounds like dinosaur, or reads like dinosaur. It's not, it's Kinosaur. This is my first video on the channel, so it's probably going to be a steaming pile of shit. So I can't wait for that. So how about we get started? Today's review is on Mandy. This film actually didn't come out too long ago. I had a friend who saw it in theaters, whereas I did not, because I am a loser. However, I did get to see it the next day on Amazon Prime for the meager price of $6. It's taken me a while to get to this review because I'm basically starting from nothing, and also trying to design the channel, which you'll have seen by now probably, or will in the future, and think, wow, it's not very good. I agree. So let's actually get to the movie, and less about me. Who cares? Mandy is directed by Panos Cosmatos. He also created a film 8 years ago in 2010 called Beyond the Black Rainbow. I personally haven't seen this movie, but I've heard good things from a particular friend of mine. After seeing Mandy, I may have to check it out. Mandy stars Andrea Riseborough, Lannis Roche, and our beloved Nicolas Cage. So I'm going to drop a synopsis on you from the IMDb page because I don't feel like I'll give an accurate representation without spoiling it for you. Mandy is set in a primal wilderness of 1983, where Red Miller, Nicolas Cage, a broken and haunted man, hunts an unhinged religious sect who slaughtered the love of his life. Slaughtered the love of it. That's kind of a spoiler, because, do people know that she dies when they watch the trailer? I don't remember. It is a revenge movie, though, so I guess that makes sense, because if she was kidnapped and not killed, then that would become a rescue movie, like Taken, and that's not really revenge? Now, I'll have to obviously come out and say it as open as possible, but I fucking love Nicolas Cage, and I always have, and not in a meme sense. I appreciate everything he's done, all of his work, and I do acknowledge that he is very comical, but I also see and appreciate what he actually puts into his movies. He's not just a meme to me. So I'm just going to jump right into this and start with the visuals. This movie is very clearly almost a visual masterpiece, depending on how you perceive what a masterpiece is visually. There are a lot of elements going on in this film that really attribute to the overall look. The first thing I noticed right off the bat was that this film is exceptionally grainy. It's not a 35mm film as far as I know, and I believe that Panos is actually just trying to emulate that. If not, and it's just a stylistic choice, I think it works really well. It looks really cool. It's very gritty, literally gritty and grainy, and I think it molds everything together nicely. Throughout the film in all 3 acts, there are title cards that occur at the first, second, and third acts. They're very stylistic, very beautiful and glittery and very 80s, and I thought they were really, really cool. Ironically, the third one and final one I didn't like as much, but I guess that was just me. Another thing I noticed that was really cool was the sky and the coloring done for the film is very otherworldly, so it tells you right off the bat that this probably doesn't take place on Earth. Now, this film starts off with Nicolas Cage just hanging out as a lumberjack, which never really gets revisited again, which I thought was funny. A big visual theme about this movie is that it's very dark fantasy and very 80s. That is a train. It's like a modern day 80s dark fantasy. And how could you go wrong with that? Now, there was a detail that goes throughout the whole film, and I thought it was so damn cool. nearly every single shot is composed with a lens flare in mind. And this gives J.J. Abrams a run for his money. Not that J.J. really revolutionized lens flares or anything. He puts a blue bar across the screen and more or less blocks out the actor's face with it. Whereas Panos, it seems like he places these lens flares himself. It's really cool because they're all various colors and they're really intricate, and they're not just simple, they're not simple lens flares. So say there'll be like a character and he's laying in a bed in a dark room and there's light coming in from the window. While he's laying there are like shapes of lens flares all around him, just framing him in the picture. And it's incredibly done. I don't know if it's visual effects or if he actually managed to make that happen. If so, amazing kudos to the cinematographer. So there's one thing I noticed throughout the movie that is very consistent and very strange, but also very cool. This movie is very dark almost all the time, and with that, there isn't much to go with lighting. So apparently Panos just like put everybody on cars because the taillights are almost a primary lighting in this film. It's pretty funny. It's obviously not intended to be funny, but every time I notice like these giant red lights just booming out behind people, it's their taillights. But it makes them look so cool. Even some of the lighting, like in Red's car, it's got some greens and reds and it looks very Evil Dead. I noticed that and I thought that was cool. Now the costumes are pretty dope. Red's costume is fairly straightforward. He does have an iconic piece of costume, which is fairly simple, but it works until he later gets his rampage attire, if you want to call it that. The creatures of the movie have incredible costumes, or so that's what you would think. One thing I really liked about the costumes is the way that he mixed it with the lighting. These costumes look very intricate and very well detailed, but the way that Panos lights the scene, you don't really see them very well, so it leaves a lot to your imagination, and then you can kind of piece together just how grotesque or bizarre these people look. And I thought that was really cool. That sounds like something I would do if I were to make a movie like that. Oh, they would even have like flashes of light that would just give you a glimpse of what these creatures looked like in their entirety. Now, the coloring and the editing during particular sequences were so well done and so vibrant that they were kind of consuming in a way. They were engulfing. They were hypnotic even, where you would catch yourself just staring straight into it and getting lost in it and just end up forgetting or not noticing parts of the movie, which brings me to a later point, but I'll get to that. Like, you get so engrossed in these giant moments with these characters that are so visually appealing that you just, it's very immersive, which is fantastic. There's one scene in particular, and I don't want to spoil it because it's a very cool scene, also a little weird. If you've seen it, you know why it's kind of weird. It's where the cult leader is basically trying to seduce Mandy, and the way that it's done, the visuals, the audio, the coloring, everything about it is extremely hypnotic, and it really caters to what this guy's objective in the scene is, which is to get Mandy to join his side. And the way that Panos goes about it, with particular feelings of hypnotism, with these immense close-ups on the cult leader, are fantastic. And to put it frankly, it almost makes you feel like you are high, like he's just got this glare on you and he doesn't break it, and he's just saying all the right things in all the most obscure and interesting ways, and then you're like, am I high? Not that I've ever smoked the devil's lettuce, but it just engulfs you and you feel like you're there and you're high, tripping, and it's really bizarre but really cool. And obviously not everybody's going to experience it like that, like I did. You kind of just, I guess you have to sort of submit yourself to that sort of experience to actually get lost in this character's eyes. Speaking of the devil's lettuce, if you watch this movie on said devil's lettuce, it's going to be something else. There are some moments in this movie that truly shine as like, okay, if I were on the devil's lettuce, if I were to inject the devil's lettuce into my devil's lettuce body, then this film would excel in being extra quirky and silly. Not to mention that scene was very Charles Manson-y, if that makes sense. But overall, visually, because I need to move on, obviously, is the cinematography was just really phenomenal, and this guy really loves establishing shots, and not just your run-of-the-mill establishing shots like they're here, they're at this house. Obviously, they have those, but there are these giant, widespread establishing shots of mountains and just the environment and these all sorts of cool stuff. And they're very 80s. They look sort of almost painted in a way, like digitally painted, and that just adds to the flavor of how this movie's like a big dark fantasy, and I loved it. All right, so moving on to the pacing, this should be fairly brief for me. I didn't have much to say about it other than I liked it. I liked the pacing. It can be very slow in the beginning, but I prefer that if it's done well, and here it is. For this particular type of pacing, I feel like he allowed these characters to live in their environment and in their characters' minds for much longer periods of time at once. Whereas, with quick cuts that are like maybe 2 to 3 seconds to like 15 seconds long, these characters have times to take breaks if they want between angles. Whereas this is one shot lasting minutes at a time, and these characters just be. And it's really, really interesting to watch. So now I want to move on to the soundtrack. So right at the beginning of the movie, they open it up with a King Crimson song, Starless. I personally really like King Crimson. I'm not like a diehard fan, but I do listen to their music, and I do appreciate what they have to offer, because I think they're extremely talented. This song in particular, I thought was a great choice. I thought it was a great choice when I heard it, because I kind of knew what to expect with the movie, but after having watched the movie, I thought it was even more appropriate. It just really embodied, to me, Nicolas Cage's character, his sadness and his passion, and just ultimately what he has to deal with and go through, and what he's left with afterwards. And I thought that was really cool and tasteful. The sound design was excellent. In that particular scene I mentioned earlier with the hypnotist stuff, the way that they add these distortions to their voices, I thought was really interesting, really nice. Sounded really cool, made my ears have a good old time. Nice little bed and breakfast in my ears. But all the hits and the violence and the gore, those sounds were nice and meaty and wet. And I thought they were quite nice. And then that leads me to the mention of Jóhann Jóhannsson, who I have enjoyed for several years. I feel like I'm not alone in this, but the first time I ever heard him and appreciated his music was for the trailer, Battle Los Angeles, I believe is what it was called. And in this particular trailer, like, it's a run-of-the-mill trailer, it's Battle Los Angeles, a very forgettable movie in my opinion, but the song was Johann's, and it was really cool. It was called Sun's Gone Down, and I listened to that song all the time, or whenever that trailer came out. So I really appreciate him for his use of passion and depth that he adds to his music. So hearing his score in this film was really cool. It worked very well. I thought there were a lot of beautiful moments that were catered by Johann's music. And naturally, I have to mention that, this year on February 9th, Jóhann Jóhannsson passed away due to an accidental cocaine overdose, which in and of itself is very sad. He died at 48, I believe. Yeah, 48 in Berlin, Germany. So it really sucks that we don't get to hear his music again in the future. It is nice to know that he left us with some beautiful pieces in Mandy and potentially other pieces in other movies that we just haven't seen yet. Hopefully, Mad respect to him. It's a shame that he was taken so soon, and we all mourn together for the loss of Jóhann. Moving on to the plot. Oh, the plot. So this movie could be considered comical and sometimes even a bit cheesy, but I think that Panos pulled it off pretty well. Like I said, there were a lot of times where you could have seen this and been like, I heard these moments, or I saw these moments, and I acknowledged them that they might be considered cheesy to particular audiences. And I still noticed that majority of it still very cool and obviously very intentional. So even so, a lot of the cheesiness and stuff comes from the use of adding in those dark fantasy elements, which if you've seen like movies like Dark Crystal or Labyrinth, they're pretty cheesy, but they're still cool as hell. So this movie does have these little snippets of comedy until the third act, which I'll get to, obviously. But even just little dialogue pieces and little moments of action from particular characters are pretty funny. So I appreciated that. This movie does not want to give you exposition easily. A lot of the dialogue comes off pretty convoluted, at least for me. Maybe I'm just a simpleton brainlet and didn't really follow very well. But there are scenes where they do give some exposition, but it's still very obscure and like stylized and how they do it. So it's interesting. And he definitely puts you to work to figure out and understand the entirety of the world building that's going on, which to me felt a little scarce. Which is okay. A scarce plot is fine, and it's understandable when Panos obviously spent a lot of time crafting this visual, audio, just plethora of cool shit happening. Included with the world building is the establishing shots, so that definitely helps you identify where you are. As with the title cards, it does as well for a couple of them. But even so, with the establishing shots, you still don't actually know where they are. It's difficult to discern, or at least it was for me. It's like the film takes place in a bubble, like a bubble timeline. It's like these things take place here, but we're here. Naturally, I did appreciate the looks of I don't know why I'm swaying and shit. This Mad Max feel is very apocalyptic. It also has Evil Dead traits to it with how the gore is done. And then also, there's one part in particular that you might even believe could be a little derivative of Ghost Rider. But maybe that's just me. If you know what I'm talking about, leave a comment. I doubt you will because I have no fans. Moving on. All right, this is my favorite part. We get to talk about the acting. Holy fuck. So this acting was phenomenal. I've been acting for about 9 years now, which could mean something or it could mean absolutely jack fuck all. But from my perspective of what makes a good actor, I thought that the entire cast was well cast and also just did a fantastic job in maintaining their intensity, their characterizations, their devotion to their character, and just the portrayal in general in each and every scene. Every time you see one of the cult members, it's ridiculous how committed they are to being who they're supposed to be. So I imagine that Panos took a lot of time with these actors and really helped them find who their character is. And it shines so well. Especially with the pacing and the long takes, you really get to experience these characters in their full realization. And with that, you realize that there aren't really any bit parts. There's no small parts in this movie. Every character is very rounded and developed. Even if it's just like particular nuances with their character, I still felt that they were very fleshed out. So Panos did a good job of writing these characters fully. Andrea Riseborough, she did very well for what she had. I did notice that she looked inhuman 90% of the time. All the shots and the lighting that she was in made her look almost creature, which obviously was cool. She also has like the eye discoloration. And Linus Roche or Roach, Linus Roach, Linus Roche. That guy was fantastic. He was a great cult leader. I loved everything he did. He was so intense. And he was just there in the moment, nonstop, no breaks, which I've already talked about. But for particularly him, he was fucking awesome. And plus, his dick was out. And apparently he wasn't really down for that until he realized the true Kino of the movie. And that sometimes you have to whip your dick out to make a statement on what art really is. Okay. I think it's time. What time is it, Kinosaur? It's time to talk about... It's time to talk... It's time to talk... It's time to talk about Nicolas Cage. The Cage himself. Nicolas Coppola Cage. That's not his middle name, but it is for now. First thing, Nicolas Cage, when he is laying down with his lovely Mandy, his beard is like so thick and black that he looked like Billy Mays for a second. Maybe that's just me, but he looked like Billy Mays. And it was, yeah. Naturally, I thought Nicolas Cage did an amazing job. He really puts himself into this role, and even in his crazy Cage moments when he's seemingly overacting, you can tell he's really feeling these emotions, and he's really there. He's crying, he's screaming, and he's actually, you can see the turmoil in his face, his strangely comical face, his expressions everybody wants to laugh at. but that is the curse of being a legendary maniac. Now, don't get me wrong, Nicolas still has actual crazy Cage moments in this film, which I thought that they were so blatant that it felt like they were a fan service to Nicolas Cage fans, which was great. It was great, but also there were times where you didn't really understand why he became Crazy Cage. But do we really care? The fact that Nicolas Cage had these crazy moments that were very particular and so outlandish was awesome to me, because it's like I said, it was like a fan service where I feel like Nicolas Cage and Panos were looking at the audience and saying, I know what you were expecting, I know what you wanted, so here's a little bit of that. And I honestly would love to see more of this in more Nicolas Cage movies in the future, where he actually acknowledges that he has these crazy personas and can really play into them and give us exactly what we want without it seeming like he's unaware of it. I think him showing us that he is aware of his crazy personas that he does would make just the relationship between us and him even stronger and better as a fan base. So that's the majority of my positive review. Obviously, I liked this film a lot, but I would like to list some cons. I'd like to do that. Part of the format on this channel is where if I really like the movie, then I'll start listing off all the pros and then end with the cons, the little side notes of like, it was great, but there were some things. Whereas if I hated the movie, I'm going to start with all the cons and how much I hated the piece of shit, and then give, this is why it kind of had some merit to it. So for this one, I really liked this movie. This was pretty Kino. So on to the cons. This one could be a con for the film as a whole, or it could just be specific to me. I found myself so wrapped up in the visuals of the movie for the first act, because they're so interesting and well done and just like in your face, that I didn't really care about what happened to Mandy, or what she was saying, or what was really going on with her. I was just like, this looks cool, that looks cool, wow, this scene is sick. And then it's like Mandy's over here doing her stuff, and I'm like, cool, Mandy, but did you see all those cool mountains around you? Because they're fucking sick. Did catch a lot of cool moments with Mandy, but like I said, I was more involved with everything around her. So what can you do? Maybe it was just me. Another con to me was these villains, these creatures in the film. They have these moments where they're very intense and they're very scary, and you're like, oh fuck, like these guys are monsters. And then in the third act, you see them again, and things happen between the cage and the monsters. And honestly, I kind of felt like it fell short. I felt like they could have been a lot more formidable, but it still had some really cool death moments and stuff. And I still felt that the monsters themselves were unique in their own right and still interesting enough to give them props, obviously. I already mentioned this one before, sort of in the midst with the craziness of Cage. As a con to me was that I felt like his reason to rage and turn into full Cage didn't seem very founded. I felt like it was just like a simple trigger that made him do this. Like, he goes through so much in the film and he loses his mind, but he doesn't go full crazy Cage until something really simple happens, and you're like, okay, cool. So I wasn't extremely fond of that, but I'm not going to really discredit the film for that. And honestly, that's really all I have for cons for the movie. So that is essentially my full review now. This one's out into the internet, so that's pretty cool. And I'd like to have a little scaling system for this channel because I'm a movie reviewer, so naturally you have to have that. So obviously I'm going to do a Kino up here, the God tier movies. Then we have Pretty Kino, which is Mandy, in my opinion. It's like between Pretty Kino and Kino. Maybe I'm just being a particular asshole. And then down here is a Kino. You get it? But yeah, this movie was Pretty Kino. I liked it a lot, but it didn't like incredibly blow my mind. So yeah, this is my review for Mandy in its full completion. I hope you found things that I had to say as interesting or valid. If you liked this video, please give it a like. I could use any likes at all. If you disagreed with what I had to say, feel free to leave comments down below. Even dislike the video if you want, or you could like it because I put in the time and effort for you to shit on me. And if you liked just the video as a whole, then please consider subscribing. Obviously, I'm going to have to beg for subscribers because I have none. So it's shameless for now. Maybe if I get a larger following, I'll stop begging for subscribers. But for now, please subscribe to my channel. Alright guys, that's it from me for today. Hopefully I'll see you again sometime in a week or so for another movie. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet because I'm still working this stuff out. So I hope you enjoyed what you saw. And yeah, take it easy. So it might be important for you to know that I don't currently have an intro at this time, so I'm just gonna sit here and sip on this delicious coffee and slowly get mild heartburn for the next few seconds.